The starship Horizon moved slowly through the darkness of space. Its metal body reflected the light of distant stars as it approached a world that no human had ever visited before. Inside the ship, soldiers and diplomats prepared for something that would change history. They were going to meet the Zorani, one of the most powerful alien species in the galaxy. Daniel Carter stood near a window and watched the alien planet grow larger. He was a soldier from a small town in Nebraska. He had joined the military when he was 18 years old. Now, at 32, he had seen many things. He had fought in wars on distant moons. He had protected scientists on dangerous expeditions. But he had never done anything like this. The Zorani homeworld was beautiful. It had purple oceans and silver forests that stretched across entire continents. Great cities rose from the land, like mountains made of glass and light. Daniel had heard stories about the Zorani. They were tall and graceful, with skin that shimmered like water under moonlight. They had built an empire that covered 1,000 star systems. And now, for the first time, they wanted to talk peace with humanity. "You ready for this?" a voice asked from behind him. Daniel turned and saw Katie Morgan walking toward him. She was his squad mate and his friend. They had served together for 6 years. She was smart and quick, and she never missed a detail. Her job on this mission was to handle communications between the human team and the Zorani. "Ready as I'll ever be," Daniel said. "You?" Katie shrugged. "I've been studying their language for 3 months. I still can't pronounce half the words, but I'll manage." The ship's captain, Nathan Cole, announced that they would land in 1 hour. All personnel were ordered to prepare for arrival. Daniel checked his equipment one more time. He carried a sidearm and a combat knife, but he hoped he would not need them. This was supposed to be a peaceful mission. When the Horizon landed on the palace grounds, Daniel stepped out into alien air for the first time. It smelled strange, like flowers and metal mixed together. The sky above was a soft shade of orange. 2 moons hung low on the horizon, their surfaces covered in swirling clouds. A group of Zorani guards stood waiting for them. They were tall, almost 7 feet, with long limbs and eyes that glowed faintly in the light. They wore armor made of some dark material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their faces showed no emotion. At the front of the group stood a female Zorani who was different from the rest. She wore robes of deep blue and gold, and a thin crown rested on her head. Her eyes were kind, and when she smiled, it felt genuine. This was Queen Valith, ruler of the Zorani Empire. "Welcome to our world," she said. Her voice was soft, but carried across the courtyard without effort. "We have waited a long time for this moment." The human ambassador, a woman named Linda Hayes, stepped forward and bowed. "Your Majesty, we are honored to be here. Earth hopes this summit will begin a new era of friendship between our peoples." Queen Valith nodded. "As do we. Humanity is young among the stars, but we have watched your progress with great interest. You are a species of courage and determination. We believe you will go far." Daniel listened quietly. He was not important enough to speak at such moments. His job was to watch and protect. So he watched, and he noticed something strange. Behind the queen stood her royal guards, led by a tall Zorani with sharp features and cold eyes. His name, Daniel would later learn, was Commander Rylox. While the queen spoke words of welcome and hope, Rylox said nothing. His face was like stone, but his eyes moved constantly, watching the humans with something that looked like disgust. Daniel leaned toward Katie and whispered, "That one doesn't look happy to see us." Katie glanced at Rylox and then back at Daniel. "He's probably just formal. Different cultures show respect in different ways." "Maybe," Daniel said, but he did not believe it. The opening ceremonies took place in a great hall inside the palace. The walls were covered with images of Zerani history, battles fought, worlds conquered, enemies defeated. Daniel stood at the edge of the room with the other human soldiers, while diplomats from both species exchanged gifts and speeches. Queen Valeth spoke about unity. She said that the galaxy was vast and full of dangers. She believed that species who worked together would survive, while those who fought alone would fall. She looked at the humans with warmth in her eyes. "We do not see you as lesser beings," she said. "We see you as partners, as friends, and perhaps, one day, as family." The humans in the room clapped politely. Some of the Zerani did the same. But Daniel noticed that Rylox and several of his guards did not move. They stood like statues, their faces blank. After the ceremony, Daniel walked through the palace corridors. He was supposed to return to his quarters, but he wanted to learn the layout of the building. Old habits from years of military service. Know your environment. Know your exits. He turned a corner and almost walked into Commander Rylox. The Zerani looked down at him with those cold, glowing eyes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Human," Rylox said finally. His voice was deep and rough. "You wander far from your group." "Just stretching my legs," Daniel said. He kept his voice calm and friendly. "Beautiful palace you have here." Rylox did not smile. "Our palace has stood for 10,000 years. It has seen the rise and fall of empires. It will stand long after your species is forgotten." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine, but he did not show it. "I'm sure it will," he said. "Have a good evening, Commander." He walked past Rylox without looking back, but he could feel the alien's eyes on him the whole way. That night, Daniel lay in his bunk and stared at the ceiling. Something was wrong here. He could feel it in his bones. The Queen seemed honest and kind, but there was darkness in her court, and Commander Rylox stood at the center of it. Daniel did not know what would happen next, but he made himself a promise. If trouble came, he would be ready. Outside his window, the twin moons of the Zerani homeworld rose slowly into the orange sky. Somewhere in the palace, plans were being made, secrets were being whispered, and the fate of two species hung in the balance. Daniel closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but sleep did not come easily that night. 2 days passed without incident. The peace talks moved forward slowly, as such things always do. Diplomats argued over words and meanings. They debated trade agreements and border territories. Daniel found most of it boring, but he stayed alert. His feeling of unease had not gone away. On the second night, he was standing guard outside the human quarters when Katie found him. Her face was troubled. "Something weird is going on," she said quietly. "I've been monitoring Zerani communications as part of my job. Most of it is normal stuff, but in the last few hours, there's been a lot of encrypted traffic between the royal guards." Daniel frowned. "Encrypted? Why would palace guards need secret communications?" "Exactly," Katie said. "I can't crack the encryption, but the volume alone is strange. It's like they're coordinating something." Before Daniel could respond, the lights went out. Emergency lights flickered on a moment later, casting everything in a dim red glow. Alarms began to wail throughout the palace. Daniel grabbed his sidearm. "Stay close to me," he told Katie. They moved through the corridor toward the main hall where most of the human delegation was staying. But they did not get far. Around the corner came a group of Zerani guards, their weapons raised and ready. "Humans," one of them shouted. "On your knees. By order of Commander Rylox, you are now prisoners of the Zerani Empire." Daniel's mind raced. This was a coup. Rylox was making his move. "Run," he whispered to Katie. They turned and sprinted down a side passage. Energy blasts scorched the walls behind them as the guards opened fire. Daniel fired back twice, forcing the aliens to take cover. It bought them a few seconds. Katie led the way through a maze of corridors. She had studied the palace maps more carefully than Daniel had. They ducked into a maintenance shaft and crawled through darkness until they reached a lower level of the palace. "We should be safe here for now," Katie said, breathing hard. "These are service tunnels, mostly used by workers and servants." Daniel checked his weapon. He had fired 2 shots. That left him with 8 rounds. Not nearly enough for what was happening above them. "What about the others?" he asked. "The ambassador? The rest of our team?" Katie's face fell. "I don't know. If Rylox planned this well, he probably captured them in the first few minutes." Daniel slammed his fist against the wall in frustration. They had walked into a trap. All those speeches about friendship and unity had been lies, at least from Rylox. The Queen had seemed genuine, but where was she now? Katie pulled out a small communication device and began working on it. "I'm trying to reach the horizon," she said, "but something is jamming our signals. Rylox must have control of the communication towers." For the next hour, they moved carefully through the tunnels and listened to what was happening above. The sounds of fighting grew quiet. Then came the announcements. Commander Rylox's voice echoed through the palace speakers. "Citizens of the Zarani Empire," he said, "tonight we have taken back our destiny. Queen Valith has betrayed our people. She invited the humans, weak, primitive creatures, into our sacred home. She planned to give them our technology, our secrets, our future." Daniel felt sick listening to the lies. "But we have stopped her," Rylox continued. "The Queen is now in custody. The human invaders have been captured. Tomorrow at dawn, Valith will face justice for her crimes. And the humans will be sent back to their little planet with a message. The Zarani bow to no one." The announcement ended. Silence filled the tunnels. Katie looked at Daniel with fear in her eyes. "He's going to kill her," she said. "The Queen. He's going to execute her in front of everyone." Daniel nodded slowly. His jaw was tight. His hands were steady. "Not if I can stop him," he said. Katie grabbed his arm. "Daniel, listen to me. This is not our fight. We're soldiers, not heroes. Our job is to survive and get back to the ship. If we can reach the horizon, Captain Cole can send a message to Earth. We can bring help." "There's no time for that," Daniel said. "You heard him. Dawn. That's only a few hours away." "So what are you going to do? Storm the palace alone? Fight through hundreds of guards? You'll die." Daniel was quiet for a moment. He thought about his life. He thought about all the times he had followed orders, done his job, and stayed safe. He thought about the Queen, and the kindness in her eyes. She had trusted the humans. She had called them friends. "Maybe I'll die," he said finally, "but I have to try." "She reached out to us, Katie. She believed in us when her own people didn't. If we abandon her now, what does that say about humanity?" Katie stared at him for a long moment. Then she sighed and shook her head. "You're insane," she said. "You know that, right?" "Probably," Daniel admitted. "Fine," Katie said. "I'll keep working on the communications. If I can break through the jamming, I'll call for backup. But Daniel," she paused and looked him in the eyes, "be careful, please." Daniel put a hand on her shoulder. "I will. Just get that signal out." He turned and walked deeper into the tunnels. The path ahead was dark and uncertain. He did not know where the Queen was being held. He did not know how many guards stood between him and her. He did not know if he would live to see another sunrise. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He could not stand by and do nothing while an innocent woman was murdered. It did not matter that she was an alien. It did not matter that this was not his world. What mattered was doing what was right. Daniel Carter was a simple man from a small town. He was not a hero in any story. He was just a soldier who believed that some things were worth fighting for. And tonight, he would prove it. The tunnels stretched out before him like the throat of some great beast. Somewhere above, Rylox was celebrating his victory. Somewhere in the palace, Queen Valith waited for death. Daniel checked his weapon one more time and moved forward into the darkness. Daniel moved through the tunnels like a ghost. He kept his footsteps light and his breathing quiet. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every sound could mean discovery. The palace above him was in chaos. He could hear the heavy boots of guards marching through corridors. He could hear voices shouting orders. Rylox had taken control, but he had not yet secured every part of the building. There were still gaps in his defenses. Daniel intended to find them. After an hour of careful movement, Daniel came to a junction where several tunnels met. He stopped and listened. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. The air smelled of metal and old stone. Then he heard something else. Soft footsteps. Someone was coming. Daniel pressed himself against the wall and raised his weapon. A figure emerged from the darkness, small and thin, with the shimmering skin of a Zorani. But this was not a guard. It was a young female, barely more than a child, wearing the simple clothes of a palace servant. She saw Daniel and froze. Her eyes went wide with fear. "Please," she whispered, "please don't hurt me." Daniel lowered his weapon slowly. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "I'm trying to help. Do you know where they're keeping the queen?" The young Zorani stared at him for a long moment. She seemed to be deciding whether to trust him. Finally, she nodded. "I am Elith," she said. "I served in the queen's chambers. When the guards came, I hid. I have been moving through these tunnels ever since." "Can you take me to her?" Daniel asked. Elith hesitated. "The queen is being held in the lower detention level. It is heavily guarded. Commander Rylox has placed his best warriors there." "I don't care how many guards there are," Daniel said. "I need to reach her before dawn." She looked at Daniel with a mixture of confusion and wonder. "You would risk your life for our queen?" she asked. "But you are human. You are not one of us." Daniel thought about the question. He did not have a grand answer. He only had the truth. "She believed in my people," he said. "She wanted peace. That means something to me. I can't stand by and watch her die for wanting to be our friend." Elith was silent for several seconds. Then she straightened her back and lifted her chin. "There is a hidden passage," she said. "It was built centuries ago for emergencies. It leads directly to the detention level. The guards do not know about it. I can show you the way." "Lead on," Daniel said. They moved together through the darkness. Elith knew the tunnels well. She had grown up in this palace and had explored its secrets since childhood. She led Daniel through narrow passages that twisted and turned like the coils of a snake. As they walked, Elith told him about the queen. Valith had ruled for 30 years. She was loved by the common people because she cared about their lives. She had ended wars that had lasted for generations. She had brought prosperity to worlds that had known only poverty. But there were those in the military who thought she was weak. They wanted conquest, not peace. Rylox was their leader. "He has been planning this for years," Elith said bitterly. "He waited for the right moment. The arrival of the humans gave him his excuse." Daniel felt anger burn in his chest. Rylox had used the peace summit as a weapon. He had twisted something good into something ugly. They reached a heavy metal door at the end of a long corridor. Elith pressed her hand against a hidden panel, and the door slid open silently. "The detention level is through here," she whispered. "There are 2 guards outside the queen's cell. They are Rylox's elite warriors. They are very dangerous." Daniel checked his weapon. 8 rounds. He would have to make every shot count. "Stay here," he told Elith. If something goes wrong, run. Find a safe place and hide. What about you? She asked. Daniel smiled grimly. Don't worry about me. He slipped through the door and entered the detention level. The corridor beyond was lit by pale blue lights. The walls were made of cold gray stone. Daniel moved forward, one step at a time, his weapon raised and ready. He heard the guards before he saw them. They were talking in low voices, their words rumbling through the silence. Daniel crept closer, until he could see them standing on either side of a sealed door. They were huge, even by Zorani standards. Their armor was black and thick. They carried energy rifles that could burn a hole through steel. Daniel knew he could not win a fair fight against them, so he would not fight fair. He picked up a small stone from the floor and threw it down the corridor. It clattered against the wall with a sharp sound. One of the guards turned toward the noise and took several steps away from the door. Daniel moved. He came out of the shadows like a striking snake. His first shot hit the nearest guard in the gap between his helmet and his chestplate. The alien fell without a sound. The second guard spun around, but Daniel was already on him. He ducked under the rifle and drove his combat knife into the weak point beneath the alien's arm. The guard roared in pain and swung a massive fist at Daniel's head. Daniel rolled away, but the blow caught his shoulder and sent him crashing into the wall. Pain exploded through his body. The guard advanced, bleeding but still dangerous. Daniel raised his pistol and fired twice. The first shot missed. The second found its target. The guard collapsed at his feet. Daniel lay on the floor for a moment, gasping for breath. His shoulder screamed with pain, but he was alive, and the door to the queen's cell was now unguarded. He pulled himself up and limped to the door. The control panel glowed with alien symbols. Daniel had no idea how to open it. Then he remembered the guard's access key. He searched the fallen warrior and found a small device clipped to his belt. The door slid open. Queen Valeth stood inside, her wrists bound in glowing chains. Her face was bruised, and her robes were torn. But her eyes were clear and strong. When she saw Daniel, her expression changed from despair to disbelief. "You," she breathed, "the human soldier. How is this possible?" Daniel stepped forward and began working on her chains. "No time to explain," he said. "We need to move." "Dawn is coming," Valeth asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Why would you do this for me?" Daniel looked into her eyes. For a moment, the universe seemed very simple. "Where I come from," he said, "you don't abandon someone who reached out in friendship." The chains fell away. The queen was free. And somewhere above them, the first light of dawn was beginning to touch the sky. Daniel and Queen Valeth moved quickly through the lower levels of the palace. Elif joined them at the hidden passage, her eyes wide with relief when she saw her queen, alive and free. "Your Majesty," Elif said, bowing low, "I feared the worst." Valeth placed a gentle hand on the young servant's head. "Your loyalty warms my heart, child. But we are not safe yet. Rylox has many soldiers. We must find allies." They traveled through the maintenance tunnels, avoiding the main corridors where guards patrolled. Daniel's shoulder throbbed with every step, but he pushed the pain aside. There would be time to rest later, if they survived. As they moved deeper into the palace's lower levels, they began to encounter others, servants who had hidden when the coup began, minor officials who had refused to join Rylox, soldiers who remained loyal to their queen but had been overwhelmed in the first hours of the attack. Word spread quickly through the hidden passages. The queen was alive. A human soldier had freed her from the detention level. At first, people did not believe it. Humans were supposed to be weak, primitive, insignificant. How could one of them have accomplished what 100 Zorani could not? But when they saw Daniel walking beside their queen, bloody and battered but still standing, doubt became wonder. Wonder became hope. By the time they reached a large storage chamber deep beneath the palace, More than 50 Zorani had joined them. Some were guards with weapons, some were workers with nothing but their hands, but all of them looked to Valeth with fierce devotion. "My queen," said an older guard named Torath, "what would you have us do? Rylox controls the palace. His forces outnumber us greatly." Valeth stood tall, despite her injuries. In that moment, Daniel saw why her people loved her. She had been beaten and chained, but her spirit remained unbroken. "We must reach the central communication tower," she said. "If I can broadcast a message to the people, they will rise against Rylox. He has support among the military elite, but the common citizens remain loyal to me. They simply need to know that I still live." Torath nodded slowly. "The communication tower is in the heart of the palace. Rylox will have it heavily defended. Then we will need a distraction," Daniel said. Everyone turned to look at him. Daniel felt their eyes on him. Curious, uncertain, some still suspicious. He was an outsider here, an alien in every sense of the word. But he had earned the right to speak by his actions. "If we create chaos in another part of the palace," Daniel continued, "Rylox will have to split his forces. That gives the queen a chance to reach the tower." "You speak wisely, human," Torath admitted grudgingly. "But who would lead such a distraction? It would be extremely dangerous." "I'll do it," Daniel said. "Give me a few volunteers. We'll hit their armory and make as much noise as possible. While they're dealing with us, the main group gets the queen to the tower." Valeth stepped forward and placed her hand on Daniel's arm. Her touch was cool, like water from a mountain stream. "You have already risked so much for me," she said softly. "I cannot ask you to throw your life away." Daniel met her gaze. "You're not asking. I'm offering. Besides, this is what I do. I'm a soldier. It's my job to walk into dangerous places so others don't have to." A moment of silence passed between them. Then Valeth nodded slowly. "Very well," she said, "but you will not go alone. Elif knows the palace better than anyone. She will guide you to the armory." Elif looked terrified but determined. She was just a servant girl, but she had already shown more courage than many soldiers. "I will do it," she said. The plan was set. Daniel, Elif, and 8 volunteer guards would attack the armory. Meanwhile, Vywith, Torath, and the rest would make their way to the communication tower. Before they separated, Daniel felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Katie standing behind him, a communication device in her hand and a tired smile on her face. "Katie," Daniel said in surprise, "how did you find us?" "I followed the trail of unconscious guards," she said dryly. "Turns out, you're not very subtle." Daniel laughed, despite everything. It felt good to see his friend alive. "I got through the jamming," Katie continued. "Captain Cole knows what's happening. He's bringing the Horizons Marines down for extraction." "But there's a problem." "There's always a problem," Daniel sighed. "The captain says landing troops on a sovereign world without permission could start a war. He needs authorization from someone in the Zorani government, someone with real authority." Everyone looked at Valeth. The queen understood immediately. "If I can reach the communication tower and establish myself as the legitimate ruler, I can grant that permission," she said. "Captain Cole can land his forces legally." "Then we better move fast," Daniel said. The groups separated and began their missions. Daniel led his small team through the tunnels toward the armory. His heart beat fast in his chest, but his hands were steady. This was what he had trained for his whole life. They reached the armory level just as the first rays of true daylight began to shine through the palace windows. Daniel could see the sky through a narrow gap in the wall. It was beautiful, soft orange, fading to gold. "Ready?" he asked his team. The Zorani guards looked at each other, then at Daniel. They had doubted him at first. Many probably still did. But they had seen what he could do. They had heard how he had saved their queen alone. "Ready?" Torath's nephew, a young guard named Salex, answered for all of them. Daniel took a deep breath. In a few minutes, they would attack the armory and draw Rylox's forces toward them. They would be outnumbered and outgunned. Many of them might die. But somewhere else in the palace, Queen Valith would reach the communication tower. She would speak to her people, and the tide would turn. "Let's go," Daniel said. He kicked open the door and charged into the light. The armory exploded in a storm of fire and noise. Daniel's team hit fast and hard, destroying weapon racks and ammunition stores. Alarms screamed throughout the palace. Within minutes, dozens of Rylox's guards were rushing toward the chaos. The plan was working. Daniel fired 3 shots at an approaching squad, forcing them to take cover. Salex and the other loyalist guards held the corridor beside him. They fought bravely, these Zerani who had chosen to follow a human into battle. "Fall back," Daniel shouted. "Keep them chasing us." They retreated through the palace, leading Rylox's forces on a wild chase through corridors and chambers. Every minute they bought was another minute for Valith to reach the tower. Every enemy they drew away was one less enemy standing between the queen and her goal. But Rylox was not a fool. After 20 minutes of pursuit, his voice crackled over the palace communication system. "All units, ignore the distraction. The queen has been freed. Converge on the central communication tower immediately." Daniel's heart sank. Their advantage was gone. "Change of plans," he said to his team. "We go to the tower now." They ran through the palace, no longer trying to hide or distract. Speed was all that mattered now. Daniel's lungs burned. His wounded shoulders screamed with every step, but he did not slow down. They reached the central atrium just as Valith's group arrived from the other direction. The queen had made it to the tower's base, but Rylox's forces had already surrounded the area. Dozens of enemy guards blocked every exit, and in the center of the atrium stood Commander Rylox himself. He was even more imposing than Daniel remembered. His armor was polished black, and his eyes burned with cold fury. When he saw Valith, his lips curled into a cruel smile. "My queen," he said mockingly, "you should have stayed in your cell. It would have been a cleaner death." Valith stood tall and faced him without fear. "You are a traitor, Rylox. The people will never follow you." "The people will do what they are told," Rylox replied. "Once you are dead, there will be no one left to oppose me." He raised his hand to signal his guards. But before he could give the order, a new voice rang out across the atrium. "The people are already rising, Commander." It was Katie. She had climbed to a balcony overlooking the atrium, and she held a communication device in her hand. Behind her, holographic screens flickered to life all around the chamber, showing scenes from across the city. Citizens filled the streets. They carried signs and torches. They shouted Valith's name. The queen's message had gotten through. Someone in her group had reached a secondary transmitter and broadcast her words to the entire planet. Rylox's face twisted with rage. "It changes nothing. Kill them all." The battle erupted. Daniel threw himself into the fight with everything he had. He fired until his pistol was empty, then grabbed a fallen guard's rifle and kept shooting. Salix fell beside him, wounded but alive. The loyalist guards fought desperately against overwhelming numbers. But they were losing. For every enemy they defeated, 2 more took his place. Rylox's elite warriors pushed them back toward the center of the atrium. Then the sky outside lit up with fire. Through the great windows of the palace, Daniel saw them descending, human dropships, their hulls glowing from atmospheric entry. The Horizon's Marines were coming. "Authorization received," Katie shouted from the balcony. "Captain Cole is landing troops now." Rylox understood that his time was running out. With a roar of fury, he charged through the melee, directly toward Queen Valith. No one stood between him and the queen. No one except Daniel. Daniel stepped into Rylox's path and raised his weapon. The Sarani commander knocked it aside with a single blow. The rifle went flying across the floor. "Foolish human," Rylox snarled. "You think you can stand against me?" Daniel did not answer with words. He answered with his fists. The fight was brutal and one-sided. Rylox was faster, stronger, and better trained than any opponent Daniel had ever faced. He struck Daniel again and again, each blow landing with devastating force. Daniel's ribs cracked, his vision blurred, blood filled his mouth. But he did not fall. Every time Rylox knocked him down, Daniel got back up. Every time the commander thought the fight was over, the human rose again. The watching Zarani, both loyalist and traitor, stared in disbelief. No one had ever seen such determination. No one had ever seen such refusal to surrender. Rylox began to hesitate. For the first time, doubt flickered in his cold eyes. "Why won't you die?" he demanded. Daniel spat blood onto the floor and raised his fists. "Because I made a promise," he said through broken teeth. "And where I come from, we keep our promises." He lunged forward one final time. Rylox swung at him, but Daniel was ready. He ducked under the blow and grabbed the commander's arm. Using the last of his strength, he twisted and threw Rylox off balance. Before the alien could recover, Daniel drew his combat knife and pressed it against the commander's throat. The atrium fell silent. Everyone stopped fighting. Daniel stood over the fallen commander, his body broken, but his spirit undefeated. Rylox's guards lowered their weapons slowly. Their leader had been beaten by a single human. The will to fight drained out of them like water from a cracked vessel. Queen Valeth walked forward through the stillness. She looked at Rylox with cold contempt. "Commander Rylox," she said, her voice carrying across the atrium, "I strip you of your rank and your honor. You will answer for your crimes before the people you betrayed." Guards loyal to the queen stepped forward and took Rylox into custody. The traitor said nothing. His eyes were empty. His coup had failed. The palace doors burst open and human marines poured into the atrium, but the battle was already over. Katie rushed to Daniel's side as he finally collapsed. "Medic," she screamed. "I need a medic over here." Daniel looked up at the orange sky through the palace windows. The twin moons were fading in the morning light. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the people of the capital city cheering. He had done it. Against all odds, he had kept his promise. As medical personnel surrounded him, Daniel felt a cool hand touch his face. Queen Valeth knelt beside him, tears glistening in her ancient eyes. "You saved my world," she whispered. Daniel managed a weak smile. "Just doing my job," he said. Then the world faded to black, and he knew nothing more. When he woke 3 days later aboard the Horizon, he learned that he had become a legend. The human soldier who had stood alone against an empire, the man who had refused to fall. But Daniel did not feel like a legend. He was just a soldier from Nebraska who had done what he believed was right. And sometimes, that was enough to change the galaxy.